Can our brain produce the energy that it needs to fire? Our brain uses the bulk of the oxygen in our body because it's so metabolically active. It's firing and functioning and using up a lot of energy. So we need to make sure that it can do that at a very good level. This includes looking at the things that help our brain produce energy. If you don't have good blood sugar regulation, you're going to really struggle to optimize brain health. We've been talking a lot about brain health lately, and I want to read y'all an email that I got recently. So in the last 5 months, I've gotten my chronic headaches under control with the biweekly treatments, B12, omega-3s, and PEA. Then over the last 2 months, I started taking the brain peptides that you mentioned. Holy moly, it's incredible. That's his words. I knew my cognition was poor, but I feel like I turned back the clock 10 years before any of the chronic migraines. So there's so much to unpack in this, but I wanted to take a moment and talk about what that means about brain health. How much can we actually influence the function and aging of our brain by paying attention to what we're doing, what we're taking, and what the latest science says about treatments and compounds. So let's break down some brain health stuff. When we're looking at brain health, there's a few categories that we kind of go through when we're working with patients and trying to make sure that we're checking these boxes. So the first one's inflammation. Inflammation puts a very big tax on our brain. And if we're inflamed, we're going to struggle to improve brain health and keep our brain functioning at a high level throughout our lives. So we really want to make sure that systemic inflammation is under control. The second is energy production. Can our brain produce the energy that it needs to fire? Our brain uses the bulk of the oxygen in our body because it's so metabolically active. It's firing and functioning and using up a lot of energy. So we need to make sure that it can do that at a very good level. This includes looking at the things that help our brain produce energy. So all of the micronutrients that we need to feed our brain so that it can continue to repair and replenish those energy stores is very, very important. Neurotransmitter function. So can these nerves fire across the synapses and function and repair themselves very well? There's a lot of data that says we can influence this. Another layer that we look at is detoxification. There's a lot of data that says as our brain is using all this energy, it creates these free radicals, and we need to clean that up. So that's detoxifying, and that's where an antioxidant comes in to be very important for brain health. As we have looked at research around things like Alzheimer's, dementia, even Parkinson's, one of the things that we see consistently is very low antioxidant levels, and that means they can't clean up the stress that starts to accumulate from functioning. So we need to make sure that we check that box. And then protection. Does our brain have the ability of protecting itself from damage cellularly and through the synapses? And there's some ways that we can influence that as well. So as the email kind of goes through that, we didn't just jump straight to some of the high-end things. We always want to work through the basic foundational changes to get something healthy, and your brain's no different. So before we start going after peptides or advanced stem cell treatments or anything, are we sleeping well? If we're not sleeping well, there is no way to keep a healthy brain throughout our lives. So can you get at least 7 hours of sleep and dedicate that time and work on doing everything you need to improve sleep? Before you do anything else, check that box. The next level is micronutrient balance. Do you have the right levels of things like B12, all your B vitamins, vitamin D, to support a healthy, highly functioning brain? I suggest you get that tested and start to balance those things out. Just as my patient described, he was dealing with a B12 deficiency. So when we got that up, brain health improved dramatically. Inflammation is another big one. You need to get that under control before we start moving on. And that can come from treatment. There's a lot of activities that you can do that'll help with that. When you look at whole body cryotherapy, when you look at diet, even reducing systemic inflammation always always improves brain function. I can't tell you how many patients I have who do a fasting mimicking protocol for like 5 days, doing something like Prolon. And by like day 3 or 4, they're like, my brain is on overdrive. It's functioning so well. So when we look at that, make sure that inflammation as a whole is under control. Part of that is going to come from nutrition. Part of that is going to come from systemic activities like something like cryotherapy, and sauna also being one. Blood sugar regulation falls under this to me. If you don't have good blood sugar regulation, you're going to really struggle to optimize brain health. So start tracking that. That comes, get a continuous glucose monitor and start seeing, am I regulating, am I stabilizing my blood sugar throughout my normal diet? Don't try and eat super healthy, just eat what you normally would and find out if you're regulating blood sugar quite well. If you're not, start noticing. This is where a continuous glucose monitor helps so much. What are those things that you're doing that are kicking you out of stable blood sugar, and start making some changes? What are those foods? What was the activity? One thing you'll notice when we go back all the way up to the top and sleep, if we don't sleep well, we don't regulate our blood sugar well. So all this starts to feed into each other. And then detoxification. Do you have a good level of antioxidant function? When we do micronutrient tests, we also get an antioxidant score for our patients, so we know, what is all your B vitamins, C, D, E, K, what are all these levels? What are all the micronutrient and mineral levels that you need? And then also, what's your antioxidant balance? Do you have enough? If you don't, you're going to start to build up free radicals and toxins in the brain, and you're not going to be able to clean that stuff up. So make sure we go through all that stuff. Now, let's talk about some of the fun stuff. When you are getting through those and you're like, now I'm ready. So this is just what we did for a few months with the patient that sent me the email. We started improving function, started improving sleep and exercise. We knew that we needed to elevate B12, so we got B12 into optimal levels. We had some inflammation, so we started increasing omega-3s to start getting inflammation under control and function. We added PEA to really go after inflammation in the nervous system. And so we were addressing all those foundations of health. When we look at those, I think in this situation, we were doing about 1,500 milligrams of PEA. PEA is a nerve anti-inflammatory. It's palmitoyl ethanolamide, if you want a mouthful. That works really, really well at reducing neuroinflammation in the brain and in the nervous system. There's been a bunch of studies that show how well it works for things like sciatica and carpal tunnel. But the thing that's not talked about is how much it helps with brain health and brain inflammation. So it really does move the needle for a lot of our patients. Omega-3s, we were doing about 3,000 milligrams a day. So just to kind of give you what levels we were looking at, we do this through testing. I would say make sure you're seeing where your starting point is before you just start using some random dosages. But I'm going to break down the peptides that we talked about and the ones that currently have the most data for brain health. So when we're looking at this, the first one's Cmax. Cmax has probably the most robust history of research when it comes to peptides and brain health. And I think of Cmax as neuroprotection. It has been shown to increase BDNF, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor, giving y'all all the mouthfuls. That when we have this growth factor in the brain, it helps to repair, but it helps to protect the brain a lot from damage. So very, very helpful for getting our brain into this space where it slows the damage and the dysfunction down. Cmax is a very good one to start with whenever we're looking at anti-aging for the brain. Another really powerful peptide is something called dihexa. Dihexa is newer. I find this to be very helpful for synapse function. Synapses are where the nerves in the brain send signals to each other. So when we use dihexa, almost everybody feels like their recall and memory and focus improve. That's because those signals are firing much better. And then the last one that I'll talk about on here is P21. And P21 has been shown to improve function in animal models, in Alzheimer's cases, and we think that it's doing that through neurogenesis. It helps our brain to create new nerve cells. So that can be really, really helpful as we are going through life, because it does get harder to do that. We used to say it didn't happen. That's not true, but it is hard. And so if we can give our brain something that helps it create new healthy nerve cells, then we can have a healthier brain throughout our life. The thing about these three is I think they all work really well together. So we actually get them compounded into one thing. So when they take one pill, it has C-Max, dihexa, and P21 all in there, so that we are giving our brain protection, we're helping the current cells work better, and then we're giving it the ability to form new healthy cells. And that was what we added into this email that got the holy moly response of how much better our brain can function. But it's not just the peptides. It was the whole process of going through and improving the foundational health of the brain, and then adding in this layer on top. So now my brain can actually use those peptides. If we try and jump to that without improving blood sugar or nutrition or sleep, it's not going to be nearly as effective as it could be. So a few other things I did want to mention as we're kind of breaking down everything that you can do for brain health is some emerging data and some old data on something called an allopolysaccharide. This is based on studies that are 10 or 15 years old that showed even in severe Alzheimer's cases, when they gave humans an allopolysaccharide, it actually reversed the progression by an average of about 5 points over a 12-month study in severe Alzheimer's. That might not sound like a lot to you, but we don't see reversal of severe Alzheimer's cases. So not only did this slow the progression of the Alzheimer's in a severe case group, but it actually reversed that and pulled that back. So what that makes us wonder is, if we start this early enough, can we slow and pause the progression of something like Alzheimer's? And if we really start looking at this as very early anti-aging, this is data that needs to be done. We need to do these research studies, but the data is there enough to tell us to be interested in using an allopolysaccharide, especially if we have a history of Alzheimer's in our family, if we have a genetic predisposition to something like Alzheimer's and dementia. It would be very high on my list to start looking at including in a brain health protocol. Hyperbaric oxygen is hard to beat when you look at what it can do for the brain, for repair, for oxygenation, delivering oxygen, for upregulation of cell function, for stem cell activation. It does so many good things, and we have so many studies that show improvements in brain health, healing, and repair that if we are really going at brain health aggressively, hyperbaric oxygen needs to be on the list. It can be there in different capacities. It can be there in different frequencies and intensities, and that's something that you would want to work with somebody on. But I have many patients who are either retired from something like the NFL, where we know brain health is high on their list, and in those cases, doing weekly hyperbaric sessions is necessary. We have other cases where doing a few intense sessions a year seems to be enough and kind of keeps the brain operating at a very high level. But by and large, it should be on the list for brain health if we are really trying to improve the function and slow the aging of our brain. And then glutathione is another big one when it comes to detoxification. Y'all have heard me probably talk about the studies that showed Parkinson's and Alzheimer's brains were depleted in glutathione. Glutathione is your master antioxidant that helps clear out toxins and free radicals in the brain. So when we're looking at some of that stuff, we need to make sure that those levels are high. We want everyone to get tested in it who has a predisposition to Alzheimer's and dementia. But it's definitely one of those compounds that, to me, everybody needs it. We use it on a regular basis, so it needs to be replenished And it's one of the very few supplements that I tell people to not stop taking, continue taking it. It just changes in dose. It's so important for every cell in our body, the brain being included in that. And then we look at something like sauna, around staying on detoxification. There's so many studies for sauna that show it increases blood flow, it increases heat shock proteins that start to turn on a lot of healing mechanisms in the nervous system. So the largest study on sauna was done on like 2,500 men, and it showed if they were doing sauna over 4 times a week, they had a 66% reduction in chance of getting Alzheimer's. So it is doing a lot for toxification and brain health on multiple different avenues. So it can be included in that. So when we look at all of this data around brain health and what we can do, let's go back to the basics first. Make sure we're sleeping well. Make sure that we have good nutrition, including minerals and micronutrient balance that we need to keep our brain healthy. If you just do those two and you do something to address inflammation, your brain is going to be on a much better pathway. If you want to continue and really lean into brain health, then we would look at something like detoxification first. And then we start getting into the very specifics of, should I be taking a brain peptide? Should I be adding in something like hyperbaric oxygen therapy? Should I be doing sauna regularly? And then do I want to bring in some of these more advanced preventative things like allopolysaccharides, or, doing regular sauna or CMAX or dihexa. So hopefully that gives you kind of a decent breakdown. I know that's a lot of information, probably gave you a bunch of notes to take on some of that stuff, but I hope that helps. Share this with your friends that might have forgotten what your name is. Have a great day, everybody. I'll talk to y'all soon.